Okay, so the next project is going to be burlap. This is one that I had made a long time ago. The clay body I'm using is 112, which is a tan spec, and it already has almost a burlappy look to it. And by just putting a stain on it, like manganese or iron or both, I get some age on it, and it shows up the texture a lot more. And it has like that fringed edge. So I'm going to make something like that. This is the same clay. So I'm cutting a piece that's about 6 by 17, just because it's a handy size to make. Like with any other template, you can make it your own size and make it taller, narrower, wider, shorter, or change the shape altogether. This is simply a starting point. So if I take this slab, and now I'm going to put it into the burlap. And I could just roll burlap on it, but I'm going to flip it over so that I have burlap both front and back, and that way it's going to sandwich between, so the inside and the outside will both be textured, and it's going to add a little bit more realism to it. So when I press the texture into it, I have to press really hard because I want the texture to get embedded into the clay so that it'll show up a nice sharp texture. So I want the top of the burlap to be just at the same level as at the clay, not sticking up higher than it, and that's going to allow me to embed it deeper. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, make sure that it's deeply embedded. I'm distorting it a little bit when I'm doing this, and that's good because burlap also is more realistic if it has a little movement to it. So here I have my burlap on both sides. And I'm going to remove the burlap now. So now I'm going to recut it a little bit because it got so distorted with all that rolling. And I'll just take a little bit off here and bring it back sort of to a rectangle, but it doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to take a tracing wheel, make a stitch down the sides. I'm holding my finger at the edge so that I can kind of control how far in the stitch line goes. I'm going to do the same thing here. Now I'm holding my thumb against the edge. Okay. And that's it. So now I'm going to flip it over because that's the outside. I'm going to take a piece of paper so that they two don't stick together. I'm going to take a toothbrush and water and toothbrush, and just go along that edge so that they will connect together. So I'm just putting this here. I'm going to gather this one up so that it kind of folds in half. And while it's still flat and gravity's not fighting with me, I'm going to attach these together and pinch them lightly so I don't destroy the texture, but I make a contact between the two sides. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. If I start at the top, there's a good chance that they'll meet each other. Then I can stand it up. I'm going to take this out, and I'm tamping it down, which is going to give it some more realism. If it doesn't collapse totally. If it wants to collapse, sometimes you can just go with it, and that will give it a little bit more animation. So when it looks like it's not going to survive, it usually does. I'm just going to push out like that. And this one I'm going to roll the top, so I change my mind. I'm going to just make this top, because it has the texture from the inside as well. It adds a little realism here. And I'm going to just pull this one down too, so that it has a rolled edge. And here I've got a separation, so what I can do now, I'm opening it up a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a clay gun. It's like a little mini extruder, and it has an end in it, if you can see it, that's sort of like a 3 circles together, almost like a Mickey Mouse. You're going to get those 3 circles together, and it's going to look like a rope. So I'm going to just take the clay, put it in here like this. These clay extruders come with I think 17 different dies on it, so you can do a lot of different things besides this one shape. So if I extrude this out and then I just turn it like that, it has kind of a ropey kind of a look to it. So I'm going to utilize that, and here I'm going to just take this little piece and put a little water on the ends of it. And if I just put it in here like that, and in here like that, it's going to look like the rope is going all the way through. Then on the other side, I'm going to have the ends of that rope. So if this were the end, just wet that a little. I can make a knot at the end too, but I could just have the ends sticking out a little bit. And on the other side, the same thing. Just have it stand out a little bit so that it looks like it, you know, then you could have made them longer so that they tie together. But that way, it kind of just gives you a form. If you wanted to make a little bit more realistic, you could take a little piece of clay and make a patch, assuming there was a hole in it because it's quite well used. So I will just take a piece of clay and I will roll it on a piece of the fabric to get that burlap texture. And it doesn't have to be straight or in line because sometimes these things are, it could be another piece of fabric too, it doesn't have to be burlap. But if I cut that with a needle tool like this, and I'm not being very careful intentionally because I want it to look patchy, and then if I just take a tool like my tracing wheel or any serrated blade, I can just go along the edge to kind of create a fringe, assuming that it's quite old. And then I can actually use the same tool to make a stitch mark, like I had sewed it back onto the, over the damaged area. Just use a toothbrush and water and apply it someplace like that. You can have an edge sticking out or something. So it just gives it a little bit of, sometimes an edge sticking up like that where it didn't quite catch is interesting. Just play with it. You can push it out from inside. You can do anything you want with it, but it's just a way to make a, if I attach that in better, there we are. Give it some animation and make these things just move around as much as you can. So I'm going to make another one, but the other one I'm going to make is going to have a fringe top instead of a roll top.
In the Surrey with the fringe on top.
And I'm going to start the same way, except this is a smaller piece. And this is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 by 12 inches. So I'm going to use this template that I've used for like quite a few different pieces, but just to give me a starting point, I'm going to cut this out here like that, and it's only going to be about this wide. And I'll just mark it over here and do something like this. Since I'm making burlap, you don't have to have any degree of precision here because burlap is anything you want it to be. But I'm going to do the same thing. This is a little bit too thick, so I'm going to thin it down a little. I'll try to make it a little bigger too, just okay. The more organic it is, the more interesting it can be, so there's no need to make it totally rectangular. So I'm going to do the same thing, put it between 2 pieces of burlap so that both sides get textured. voila, no threads, except that one. So I may just leave it the way it is. I may take off a little of this, but the fact that it's wider up there is not a bad thing. I'm going to also put a stitch mark on this one, the full length of it, just as I did with the other one. These stitches are very irregular, which is fine because we want that to grow out. And in order to make the fringe, I could use the actual fringe from the side here, but that's going to make a very weak fringe. So to make it a stronger fringe, I'm going to do the same thing I did with the little patch that I put on the other one. And I'm just sort of creating a fringe. And I'm going to accentuate it by just putting a couple of needle tool marks on it to separate out some of those individual threads. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And actually I'll probably have to do it inside also, just to continue the realism a little bit. So I'm going to do that. And the needle tool goes like that. You can do it a whole bunch actually, you don't have to do it so gently. I'll do the other side very quickly, just so that when you see the inside, you're going to see it looking very much like the outside. And that makes it very, for the moment, this one seems to be working fine. Okay, this is the inside because I have the stitches on the other side. I'm going to take my toothbrush and water, and I'm going to attach them in the same way I did the other one, where I'm going to fold it. I'm using this just to keep the two attaching in the middle, only at the edges. And I'm going to pinch those together like that. Get some bulk. And I'm going to cut myself another rope. So I'm going to take another piece of clay. Okay, so I'm going to push this clay so that I end up with a rope. If I hold it up and I just let it come down like that, I'm going to get a long piece, and then I'm going to turn this to give it more of a ropey kind of a look. So this is enough to go around it, but I'll need another piece in order to make the ends, because it's not long enough to tie, and I want it to look like it's tied. So I'm going to do that right now, and just add another little piece so I'll have it ready. Okay, so I'm going to stand this up now. I'm going to take the paper out and just let it push down a little bit to form it into something a little bit more organic. And then I'm squeezing the middle to make it look like it was tied. Just pushing and pushing and pushing. If you want to use it as an actual functional piece, you can't tie it too tight because you won't have any room to put anything in it. But if you don't care about that, you can close it up totally. And then I'm going to just sort of make these edges a little bit more organic too. And I can take this and just take a toothbrush and water along it to wrap it around and let them overlap. I'm not going to make an actual tie because I will break it off if I do that. So I'm going to just leave it like this, and then I'm going to fake it. You can just take another little piece and you can get it in to go in there and kind of just make it look like it's a part of a tie. You can make knots at the end of it or do whatever you want. And just as I did on this, on the sample I had showed you, you can make little loops, like belt loops on it, so that it looks like they're holding it in place. And you'd probably want those to be textured with a burlap as well and stitched so that they could get attached. So you'd stitch the line here and stitch a line here, and then use my toothbrush and water, and then just, I'm working backwards because I'm not looking straight of what I'm doing. But that's the general idea of what you would be putting there. And then manipulate this to come out or be whatever it is that you want it to be. So that's another burlap bag. Just one other thing. Okay, the next project is going to be denim. This is a cup that I had made that has a denim texture on it that was made from denim. And you can see that the texture doesn't show up a whole bunch on the clay, but it does once that you've put a stain on it to make it more accentuated. So I'm going to cut out this piece, and I'm going to use a template, sort of. This is 4.5 by 9.5, but it's only an arbitrary number like all my other numbers are. And it just should get me a cup about the same size as, or maybe slightly larger than the one I just showed you. So I'm cutting that out, and I'm going to save this piece for the base. And I'm going to roll this also between two pieces of denim, which obviously came from a pair of pants. And I'm going to put it down like this, and like that. Okay, I'm going to take my rolling pin, roll. And frankly, I don't even think it matters if you're using the top of the denim or the bottom. I think they both translate to about the same texture. So I just want to also thin those edges just a tiny bit to make them look a little bit more denim-y than they would look if they had a raw edge like clay. So I'm just going around to soften that edge a little bit. And now we're going to remove the fabric. I will bring it back around a little bit closer to the rectangle because I stretched it out a bit. And I'll just use a little denim to make sure that edge is there. I'm going to put stitch marks on it like I did. There's a little wrinkle there, but denim can do that, so I'm going to leave that alone. And I'm going to put a stitch mark at the top, sort of like would do with any fabric. And I'm going to put a double stitch here because it's often a reinforced seam on the side. And that's all I really need on it. I'm going to end up putting a pocket on it, but I may wait until it's standing up to put the pocket on it. So right now, I don't have to do anything more except to just make it into a cylinder. And this clay is really soft, so it's going to be a very floppy cylinder. So I'm going to go here with my toothbrush and water, and here with my toothbrush and water, and overlap those two. I want my stitch marks to show. I want it to show that it's overlapped because on real cloth it would do that. So you see there's a seam there. And I'm going to put this on a base. I need to texture the base, which I didn't do yet. And I'm going to have the texture only on the very bottom because there's no need to have it on the inside because it's not going to show, and it's just as well. So I'm just going to put it this way and put the cup here to get an idea of how much I need to score. So I'm going to take my toothbrush and water and just estimate just the way I need to put it. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And again, because this is fabric, I'm not aiming at a perfect cylinder. As a matter of fact, the less perfect the cylinder is, the more likely it's going to look like it's fabric. So have it a little puffy and have it a little bit off is okay. Unless it's not okay with you, and then make it whatever you want it to be. But it's okay with me. So I'm just going around the bottom so that the bottom conforms to whatever the side is deciding it wants to be. I'm going to undercut it just a tiny bit so that you don't see so much of the side of the clay. And actually I'm going to take the denim here like this and just form more of a bottom, since this kind of just press the denim into it so that the texture is all the way around. And then I'm going to put the pocket on. So I made a pocket that's kind of typical of a denim pocket. I'm going to, well, I didn't texture that either. I need to do that. So I'm going to put my clay here. By doing this, I'm also stretching the clay a little bit and giving it a little bit more dimension, making it a little more fabric looking, which is not going to be so severe. Maybe just trim it down slightly. And then I'll put stitch marks here because it's going to have to be stitched onto the body of the cup. And I'm going to leave this top open. I'm also going to thin it down a little because that top is going to look a little too thick for a piece of denim. So I'm going to find a place that I want to attach it to. Say I attach it over here. I'm going to take a toothbrush and water. So that I can attach it. And when I do attach it, I'm going to press up against the sides here. But I want the top to open because it's more fun if it opens, because then you can put something there. You could put a bandana in it, or you could put a tea bag in it, or you could use it functionally or decoratively. And then I'm going to take some little rivets, or whatever you call those things, on the side, and make it look like it's attached quite well. So I'll just make 4 of those, hopefully someplace close to the same size. It's kind of a small cup. I need to make them slightly smaller. So I'll just make them round. Then I'm going to take a toothbrush and water and just put them in the corners, press them a little bit so they kind of form a flatter surface. That adds a little bit of realism to it. I need to face myself so I can see what I'm doing, because otherwise I'm messing up. I'll turn it around in 2 seconds and you'll see it. Okay, and I am going to put a label on it because that's a place, like I had on the cup that I showed you, it has a place where you can sign your name, or you can put anything on it you want, but it kind of gives a little sense of realism to it. So I'm just going to take my little label and put it over there. And actually I can stitch that on too. I could have done it while it was flat, but I'm going to put a couple of stitch marks so it gives it a little authenticity. And there I have a cup. And if I just tap it down a little bit, I can get a little bit more motion out of it to make it look like it's a little bit more organic, which paper, or rather denim, would be. And of course you can put a handle on it if you wanted to, or just use it as a cup on a desk or whatever. So that's a denim cup.